This video is for the absolute beginners to AutoCAD. I want to show you basically how to set up a drafting environment, your grid spacing, your snaps, the different types of coordinate, ways of entering coordinates, setting up limits, withdrawing for quick print, and how to set your drawing with the zoom and the erase commands. This is a command approach. Basically, that's how I learned AutoCAD. I do use the different palettes, but for the most part, I use shortcut commands to draw. So to get started, I'll open a new drawing. Notice that the grid by default is set up at some spacing with the major lines every 5 small boxes. By default, the coordinates are not displayed. To show your coordinates, you want to click on this customization, these 3 little lines in the lower right corner, and check off coordinates. Now your coordinates will be displayed in the bottom right here. To set up the grid, there's 2 ways. You could either type in D settings or press the F3 short function key. So I'll just type in D settings as I start typing. The autofill suggests the command, so I'll hit enter. So this is how you set up the snap and grid. I'll select it. The toggle for snap on is F9, the toggle for grid is F7. So for this purpose, I'll set up a snap at a 1/8 inch unit increment. I'll set up the grid at a 1/4 inch, and I'll show the major lines every 4 units. Notice that my grid just got adjusted. Next thing I want to do is set up the limits to the drawing. Many times you may want to do that later on, but I like to set up my limits in the beginning. Particularly I want my grid and snaps to be aligned with the origin. The limits allow you to basically set up the grid relative to any axes you want. But for instance, if I'm drawing full scale at 8.5 small part, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I may want to do that. Again, you could reset the limits at any point, and I'll do that later in the video. So I'll type in the word limits. But before that, I want to show you the different coordinate entries. There are 2 ways of entering coordinates in AutoCAD, Cartesian or polar. Cartesian coordinates are entered 1 unit at a time, separated by the comma. Polar coordinates are entered with the less than sign being the angles, so you have a magnitude less than sign at an angle. And then you can enter them as absolute or relative. Absolute, you just enter them in, and the coordinates will be the absolute coordinates will be relative to the origin. Relative coordinates will be from where you're at. Then use the character at sign shift 2 to specify at. So to set up the limits, I'll type in the word limits, and I'll just enter 0, 0, enter. It asks me to specify the upper limits of for this purpose. I'll specify, say, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so 11 inches for the X, comma 8.5 inches high. So now if I zoom using the shortcut Z enter or Z, the spacebar acts as an enter key in AutoCAD, so Z spacebar. When I say enter, I'm really pressing the spacebar. So Z enter, A for all, enter. Notice that I zoomed in to the limits that I just set. So I have 8.5 units high and 11 inches across, centered on my screen. To start drawing, the shortcut command for a line is L. So L, enter, and I already enabled my snaps on the drafting, on the dialog box. And drafting, if my snaps are enabled, they're always available. The grid toggles here, and the snap on and off is here. So suppose I wanted to draw a square. I'll start it here. I'll press my left mouse button, and the first, I'm going to draw a line 4 units across to the right, and I'll use relative absolute relative polar coordinates. That's the most simplest way to draw in AutoCAD, unless you have a purpose of using absolute Cartesian coordinates. So if I wanted to draw a line 4 units to the right, I would hold down the shift, press the number 2, and enter a @ symbol at 4 less than sign at an angle 0, enter, and it draws a line 4 units long at an angle 0. If, for example, I wanted to draw a line 4 inches up using the Cartesian coordinates, I could specify, I could hold down the shift, press the @ so for my X I'll enter 0, comma, and for my Y 4, comma, and it's the same thing as at 4 at an angle 90, but I just use the relative Cartesian coordinates. To draw a line back to the left, I'll use the relative polar coordinates. So I'll hold down shift, press the number 2 at 4 less than 180. There's my third line, and if I wanted to close something I'm drawing, I press the number 2 mouse button and select close, and it closes the geometry that you're drawing. Next I want to draw a circle in the center of here. It's pretty straightforward if you have your snaps set up. The shortcut command for circle is C, enter. It's pretty straightforward to draw a circle in the center here, being that the grid is set up and your snaps are on. Another way of drawing a circle in the center, if you needed to draw a circle somewhere else at some dimension, you could use the Osnaps by offsetting the lines. For example, if I wanted to draw a circle in the upper right corner, 1 unit away from this line and 1 unit away from this line, I would type in the word offset, specify a distance of 1, select this line, and select to the interior, select this line, select to the interior, and press number 1 mouse button. And now to draw my circle, C, enter. I would hold down the control button, press the number 2 mouse button, select intersection. The Osnap feature will go to the intersection. I still have my offset. Command C, enter. Intersection. And here I could draw a circle using the snaps, or I could specify a radius or diameter. If I wanted to specify a radius, I would type in R. Specify radius or diameter. So if I wanted a radius of a 1/2 inch, I would just enter it that way. If I wanted to specify a diameter, I would basically C, enter. Suppose I want to draw somewhere on this line, I'll pick the nearest point to this line. D, enter, 1 unit. And that's the diameter. The other purpose of setting up the limits in the beginning and to delete these other 2 lines, the short command for erase is E, enter. You select what you want to erase. I'll erase all of these features for now and draw the circle in the center. C, enter. The other purpose of setting up the limits in the beginning is for printing. If I want to do a quick print, if the limits are not set up, then if you want to do a quick print, you may be zoomed out of what you want to print, especially if you want to do a quick print within the model space without setting up a layout. The shortcut command for print is Control Shift P, Control Alt P, Control Shift, Control P, Control P. I'm sorry. Suppose I wanted to write a PDF, and what do you want to, in this area, let's say the paper is A-size paper, what do you want to plot? Here you could select limits, and say you want to center the plot, fit to paper, and you can preview how it's going to print. If you wanted your drawing to be larger, now remember this is not the scale, we're not setting up a layout, we're just doing a quick print. Hit escape for the moment. You could re-specify the limits, so let's type in the word limits and pick limits closer to the drawing features that you want to print. And now if we hit Control P, we center a plot and we print to the limits. We select PDF, we preview. Our square and circle is much larger on the paper because it's printing to the limits. Obviously this is not to scale. I'll show you in another video how to print to scale and do a layout. But in this video, this is just the fundamental basics. I wanted to show you how to set up the limits and what role they play in aligning your grid and printing, and how to set up your environment using the F3 or D settings command, the zoom, shortcut, line shortcut, circle shortcut, and erase shortcut, basically Z, L, C, and E. That's all I basically want to show you in this video. Thanks.